Good evening. It now being 7:03 on July 11th of 2022. I would call this meeting of the Committee on Ordinance and Rules to order. I would ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would ask everyone to remain standing and take a moment of silence for our service members serving here and abroad, as well as our first responders. Thank you very much. You can take a seat. Clerk Semino, can we please have a roll call to begin the meeting?
Certainly. Councillor Ringus?
Here.
Councillor Hume will not be attending this evening. Councillor Flaherty? Here. Councillor Ryan?
Here.
And President Barrica is here as ex officio. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Semino. As to approval of minutes, we have no minutes to approve this evening, so we'll be moving right into old business, which is 22015, Citizen Petition Zoning Ordinance Text Amendments, Proposed Amended Article XV 111, Medical and Adult Use or Non-Medical Marijuana Establishments, and related amendments to Section 135-601 and 135-806, or take up any action relative thereto. Is there a motion to take Order 22015 off the table?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Ryan, a second by Councilor Flaherty. As no one is attending remotely tonight, all votes are by traditional method. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is unanimous to remove the motion from the table and to begin tonight's meeting. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight. A couple things I just wanted to address before we get to our first presentation of the evening. Thank you to all those who spoke at our last meeting. We had a public hearing. We had a presentation from a few different individuals, but the main gist of that meeting was to hear from residents, and we had an outpouring of residents come out and speak both for and against this new proposed language. It is difficult to stand up in a public setting and to kind of put yourself out there. So I do thank everyone who took the time to do that. I also thank everyone. It was a very, I think the meeting was, the decorum was present, and you don't always see that at public hearings. So it was great to see, despite a very sort of controversial issue where there's very sort of different viewpoints on what people want to see happen, that everyone sort of maintained that level of decorum. So I was thankful to that. Thank you also to everyone who continues to reach out to counselors. We continue to receive emails, phone calls. I know this past week I've been on the phone constantly with folks weighing in on both sides of this issue. Tonight there is no public comment. It was not scheduled for that. We are going to have some presentations, both from our town clerk, Jim Casey, to address one of the big things that came up during the public hearing from residents in terms of the idea of a ballot initiative in terms of this ordinance, and also a presentation from the proponent on some of the issues that were brought up by residents, specifically as to some of the odor control issues. So again, thank you to everyone for being here tonight, and I would welcome Clerk Casey to the podium.
Good evening. I'm Jim Casey. I'm the town clerk for the town of Braintree. My office is involved in this on an administrative endeavor, especially when it comes down to elections or proposed elections and some of the charter changes. And what I've been asked to do is, at a very high level, kind of explain the process of why this particular order, council order, is before you and how we can proceed as it comes up for a vote. Let's see here. Okay, so we didn't open it up. Or did we? Here we go. Oh, there we go. In reviewing the process of zoning ordinance, typically it follows what I call a town council process. It is initiated by some government entity, and there's a process in which it is reviewed by the planning board. They are required to make a recommendation at a certain point of time, submit it to the council, which it then will go through a process. Another process that it can go under to present it is what we call a citizens initiative process. This is found in our Braintree Charter, Section 7, and what there is a process to reach out to the voters to see if they're interested to bring a issue in front of the full voters at some point in time at an election. And the third one is, again, found under the council charter. This one is initiated by the town council. It's a ballot question, and there's a process that kind of describes how this particular one will work. So the first one I want to take a look at is the town council process. It begins at the planning board, as I stated. The planning board will review it and submit their recommendation to the council. The first thing the council will do at that point in time is refer that to this committee, and this is where this particular council order is standing at this point in time. The committee's charge is to review the issue at hand very thoroughly, and once they're ready to take a vote, they will only take a vote for a recommendation. There are a portion of the full council, and they're recommending how the the committee feels, and how this should be voted upon. And then finally, once the committee reports, this issue is brought up before the full council, and then the full council will make the final determination. On zoning articles, though, this is requires a supermajority vote. Therefore, it needs a minimum of 6 votes for anything to pass. The next process is a citizen initiative process. This starts with a group of residents, registered voters, coming together. They sign an affidavit of these 10 individuals to bring an issue eventually to the town council that eventually could possibly be put on a ballot. This group, once they have their 10 individuals, they will designate one of their individuals to be the clerk of that committee or that little group, and that's what the person that the town clerk and the clerk of the council will interact with. They don't interact with the whole group. The requirement for this is that they have to obtain 250 or more voters' signatures, and it has to be at least 25 signatures per district to move the process into the next phase. The next phase would be filing with the clerk of the council and the town clerk. And at this point in time, the town clerk's office staff will certify each of the signatures that have been submitted to ensure, 1, they are a registered voter, and 2, that they're a registered voter here in Braintree. The charter does not define how long the town clerk's office staff has to take to do the certification process. There are other things in the charter under the citizen initiative process that has specific time frames. Because of the absence of that, I have taken and put a 10-day time frame that we will definitely get the signatures certified within that time frame to make it clear for everyone how this process would work. The next part is the certification. If they meet the requirements, if they do not meet the requirements, it's the end of the affidavit, and they'd have to start anew if they want to continue. If it meets the certification process, the affidavit is submitted to the town solicitor, and who determines if the petition is in proper form. The town solicitor has 15 days under the charter to do this review. If the document is not in proper form, it's rejected and the process ends once again. However, if it is in proper form, the town clerk will provide the group blank petition forms so they can go out and start collecting additional signatures. Under this initiative, they need to obtain 10% of the voters from the last local election. That means they would need to collect 2,771 valid signatures. And they have to do that within 30 days of when they receive the petitions from the clerk. Once they collect their signatures, they file it with the town clerk. Typically, a lot of signatures can be filed in piecemeal. There's a requirement in that everything comes in one single document. So they have to hold on to them and submit them as a group. And then again, the town clerk then will certify those signatures. And again, a 10-day time frame to complete that process will be taken. If the signatures are not certified, the process ends. If it is certified, the town clerk will know the council, the clerk of the council, and the petitioner's clerk. And the council is required to act within 30 days of that notice. And there's three possibilities of things that they can do. Is pass without change, pass with an alternative measure. Once they pass that, it'll go to the ballot. If it's rejected, the petitioners committee has another bite of the apple. They need to get an additional 5% of valid signatures, with at least 15% of the total signatures collected across each of the council districts. This is a very hard twist on this, and the fact if the original 10% were collected in one or two districts, and you have a shortage of district signatures in another one, you have to work much harder to meet that criteria of 15% across all of the council districts. And when I talk about a council district, that includes the A and B precinct. For this particular election, if this was to happen, to get this petition onto the November 8th ballot, this whole process has to be completed and filed with the Secretary of State's office no later than August 3rd. Our next process is in the town council ballot process. This is found in the section 7-10 of the town charter. And essentially, they need to submit to the voters that any regular town election for adoption or rejection of any measure in the same manner with the same force and effect as hereby provided for the submission by petitions of voters. And notice I have highlighted any regular town election. Section 7-1, town elections. It defines what the regular town election is. And the regular town election shall be held on the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November on odd number years. It cannot be put on the ballot on even number years because even number year elections are state elections, odd number elections are local municipal elections. Let's take a look at this summary of the process here. If the current petition that is before you, if it follows its path, a decision can be made by August 2022. If the citizens' initiative was in place, and it's followed its path and all of the milestones have been met, a decision could come forth by November 2022 when it went to the ballot. So, but the other criteria issue here to remember is August 3rd. If it's not there, it doesn't get on the ballot. And the final one is the town council process. If the councils decide they want to put it on the regular town election, a decision will not come until November of 2023 at that local election. That's a very high level. That's the way the process works. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them for you.
Thank you, Clerk Casey, for that information and putting this sort of presentation together for us. Any questions or comments from members of the subcommittee? Councilor Flaherty?
I had submitted some questions concerning whether we have the authority to put something on the ballot process to the town solicitor, who has consulted the Attorney General on the question. And the last time I heard, they hadn't heard back on that. And I'm just checking with you to see if this all aligns with what the Attorney General's office said, or if that has not been, if we haven't heard back yet.
I have spoken with the town solicitor at 6 p.m. this evening, and the Attorney General's office has not provided final feedback on this particular process. Whether it can go under Section 7-10, there's no decision. It's a local election, so there will not be a ruling. It's how the question may or may not be able to be worded is the issue at hand at this point in time.
So it's my understanding that there has been some case law that has been developed over time since one was put forward in Norwell. And how does that, I guess what I'm trying to communicate is that I need to know the answer to that question before I can really accept all of this information, because I'm not sure how it's going to all pan out.
Yeah, at this point in time, the Norwell question is being reviewed with the Attorney General's office. Again, we're looking at different forms of government, and sometimes within the type of government you're working with, even though we're a town, we're a city, and the city form of government acts many times differently. In the town government, you are essentially the town meeting members. And in Braintree, when we had a town form of government, we had 252 town meeting members who would make these ordinance changes, zoning changes, and they, at that meeting, could vote to put something on a ballot at that particular time. Under here, it's a little different, and then the wording of a ballot question becomes a more legal issue, and it's certainly above my pay grade. Only took 1 year of law, and I am not a lawyer and don't intend to ever be one.
Okay.
Anything further, Councilor Flaherty?
No.
Councilor Ryan? Again, thank you for the presentation. I think what you've done, though, is nicely set out, and we'll be able to put this up on the website. Is that correct, Clerk Semino? Sort of the processes by which the council sort of looks at different issues that come before us. The town council, or the one that you call the town council process, is the typical way that we sort of look at items that come before us. And I think there's been some misinformation out there on Facebook in terms, or some half-truths, if you will, in terms of how this came before us. This is not the council proposing this change. This was brought before us by a citizen, that being Mr. Doucette, on behalf of Flower Express, to change this zoning. So this is not something the council has brought up on their own. I know there's sort of talk about that. There's also been some talk that the council didn't campaign on this issue. Well, we didn't, because it wasn't before us. So this is the typical process by which we go through and figure out how these things are going to come to pass. And using an analogy, just a few months ago, this subcommittee dealt with a business that wanted to open a veterinary clinic in a particular zoning area that had to be changed. So it came before us as a citizen petition. It went to the planning board for a recommendation. The town council referred it to the committee on O&R, who makes a committee recommendation, which is non-binding to the full council. It's just what this committee determined. And then it goes to the town council for as you noted, a supermajority vote, which means 6 of 9 councilors would have to approve any sort of change. And that is the typical process that we use. In terms of, thank you for the flow chart, because the flow chart was nice. The citizen initiative process under the town charter, which is Article 7, Section 7-7, that was something that got brought up a lot at our last meeting, where citizens wanted to find out the way whereby they could make the decision and put it on the ballot. The flow chart is very nice, but at the very minimum, you're talking 2 months at very least, and that's not even counting the time of getting out there and you have 30 days to do it. But even if you're up to getting that 2,771 valid voters signed, that's a significant process, and there's no way numerically that this could be done by August 3rd.
Yeah, I would say the train has left the station on that one.
And then the final piece is if the council, under the charter, does have the authority to put something on the ballot for the residents of the town to vote on. I think that's, from my looking back at the council over the years since its inception in 2008, and I'm sure you're historical about the council as well, declared Casey. I don't think it's ever been used that the council itself has put anything on as a ballot question.
There was the special election for the school debt exclusion that was voted on by the council back in, what year are we in here? 2020, yeah, 2020. It was originally, if you recall, it was originally scheduled for March 26th, and COVID came upon us, and then it was delayed until September in between the primary and special election.
So with the exception of that question as to the school, nothing from a zoning
never
perspective has ever come before us.
Never before us.
And as you said, in the charter itself, it would have to be during a regular town election, which means we couldn't put it on the ballot until not this coming November election. We would have to wait until the next election, a year out. Thank you for that. Any further questions for Mr. Casey? Seeing none, thank you for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you for having me, and everybody have a safe evening.
At this point, I would call up for our next presentation the petitioners, who I know are going to be doing a presentation on some of the concerns that were raised at our last meeting by residents.
I think I'm sharing. I thought I was sharing. There it goes. Got it. Thank you. Good evening, and again, thank you to the council members here tonight, council president. Thank you for Braintree Town members for having us once again. Tonight, we wanted to kind of do a little deep dive into some of the questions that came up at our last meeting and give you some very high-level information. I do want to share that we are still in our planning phases. We're still entering and exiting the building and taking measurements. So this is our best plan of action with our vendors. We have them in the building. We've been having a lot of meetings to ensure that we can share information that is as accurate as possible. And I wanted to share some of that information with you guys tonight. So one of our goals that came out of one of our initial early meetings with city councilors was that they wanted us to make sure that we were being environmentally friendly. So we wanted to build a LEED certified building. What that really means is that it's the most widely used green building rated system in the world. It's a framework for efficiency, carbon and cost savings, water waste reduction, as well as environmentally friendly business practices. And our goal is to achieve the highest rating possible for an existing building. The building is about 100 years old and it's been vacant for over 20 years. So we are just hoping to meet the LEED certifications as a minimum requirement. Sustainability and environmental quality is something that came up a lot for the group and the citizens in their questions. So we wanted to talk about odor mitigation and water and waste. And our odor mitigation plan is a two-phased approach. We're thinking not only of internally odor mitigation for our employees and our team members to ensure that they're closed and they're not in constant odor of the plants. They are working in a farm, so there's an expected odor concern there too, but we also wanted to make sure that we minimize the odor inside the facility so that when we do apply our carbon filters for outside of the facility, we're essentially not exhausting any odor at all. Also, we will have a positive water cycle to try to minimize water consumption and also use reverse osmosis to try to minimize water waste as well. So these are some images to try to give you a diagram of what our plans are. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with water osmosis systems, but essentially they recycle the water, and then some of the water is concentrated with all the pollutants, and that's gone into the sewage systems, like the toilet water does. But then we're able to reuse at least a third of that water in the facility, so we're not wasting all of the water that we're filtering through. One of the most important things we wanted to do and apply is a rainwater to portable water conversion system. So this is an image of a building that was just built actually in Atlanta, Georgia by this facility. And they are actually using the rainwater to also energize some solar panels and some gardens outside of the facility. What we're hoping to do is to collect the rainwater and put it through a filtration system and then use it internally and then use reverse osmosis to minimize the water exiting and the water waste on the other end. For odor mitigation, this was a big taken on project. So we tapped into the biggest name in the game. EcoSorb has been in business for over 25 years. They're a trusted odor solution for inorganic and organic odors. They are in power plants, they're in asphalt production, they're in an environment. They do a lot of water preservation and composting as well. They have a natural odor solution, which aligns very well with our business model. It is plant-based. It's called CNB 100. It's budget-friendly, environmentally friendly. It essentially removes 100% of 97.8% of the odors inside of the facilities. It's effective, it's natural, and it's safe. The way that it works, oh, actually, hold on, that's the chart in here. So essentially, it has a contact cell that absorbs the odor, and then that absorbed odor is transformed into a hydrogen compound that is odorless. And this is a very highly chemical process that I'm not extremely familiar with, but we can answer some questions because we have some experts in the room that can. But it's essentially the first step of our 1-2 punch for odor mitigation. Once we've eliminated most of the odor inside the facility, we will be funneling it through carbon filters twice before it exhausts out into the environment. Our carbon system, so EcoSorb did some research, and this is quotes directly from their websites and their materials. They have done independent studies that show that they're very safe for human consumption, especially the odors are not, and the chemicals, the plant-based source is not going to impact humans. They've done marine life impact for waters, and they did a lot of testing around marine life, and it's been found to be non-toxic to marine life or the water source. And they also did a volatile organic compound analysis, and that's important because the terpenes in most plants are considered volatile organic compounds. And they wanted to make sure that they did both tests to meet the EPA method 624 and 8260 to ensure it does not contribute to any volatile organic compound output. And all tests showed that they were non-harmful to humans, marine life, the environment. Our second and third layers of odor mitigation would be our carbon sensors, which are from ProGuard. Innovative Solutions has essentially upped the game in carbon filtration. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they were only using advanced oxidation processes to get all these carbon mitigations. This is what most hospitals have used for a very long time. But what they have added is a bipolar ionization process that essentially neutralizes the ions of the odor and eliminates them. So we will not only be eliminating odor internally with a plant-based solution, but then funneling all of that air through a first ProGuard system, and prior to exhaust, they will go through another ProGuard system with carbon filters as well. So our goal is for zero odor escape. We've seen this. We're meeting with these teams continuously to make sure that they're understanding the capacity that we need to have. This is a very big priority for our team, so we wanted to make sure we address both indoor and outdoor mitigation to ensure that we have zero odor escape from the facility. Are there any questions about those topics?
Councilor Ryan, Councilor Flaherty, any questions? Councilor Flaherty.
Well, before I ask, are you finished with the presentation?
Yes, ma'am. The rest of the presentation you've seen multiple times.
Then I do have questions. So
Absolutely.
some residents have expressed a concern that the facility could emit THC into our community, causing passive exposure to residents. Can you address that?
I can, but I think that our chief of cultivation may do a better job than I will. I'll start to kind of soften it in as he gets himself up here, Huggins. We can't extract THC, the active compound, because it's not active until the plant has been processed. But I think he does a better job at explaining that, so I'm going to let you tap in.
What was the question again? Sorry.
Some residents have expressed a concern that THC can be emitted by the facility as part of the because of the part of the processing, and that would expose residents to passive exposure to THC, and that's what I'm looking for you to address.
Sure. So the way that THC is formed in a plant, it happens at the late stage of the plant's life cycle. In the earlier stages, the plants produce CBD, CBG, CBN, different cannabinoids. The tetrahydrocannabinoid comes at the end stage of life. But it's also very sensitive, which is why the curing process for cannabis is so stringent, because these volatile organic compounds can be destroyed quite easily. So how the plant is stored, how the plant is processed, directly correlates with how much potency is still available in the flower. As a result, those VOCs being in the air at its form of THC is not possible, because in order for THC to actually be exposed, it needs to be ignited. So the compound that's actually in flower, as it is organic, is actually THCA. There's a conversion process when it is ignited, either through a vape pen or by fire. The THCA, the A drops, and then it becomes converted into THC. So that's not a possibility, if that answers your question.
It does. It begins. So there's many compounds that are produced by the plant, and THC is one of them, but you listed a host of others. And there's two issues at hand. One is odor control, because that's the center of town, and I know residents are concerned about that. Mm-hmm. And the other has to do with passive exposure to drugs, for people who don't wish to use them.
Right.
So what about the CBD, for example, or the other compounds that you listed?
Yeah, so the air filtration systems in these buildings are really sophisticated, meaning that they're trying to keep anything that's airborne, from passing, from leaving the facility, including viruses. So this is something that's not only designed, it wasn't designed initially for cannabis. It was designed for viruses and for pathogens and things of that sort. But they found testing that realized that this also helps to, aid the plant's health and helps to reduce, the volatile compounds that could leave the facility. So at the end of the day, the building that we're proposing to have here will be one of the most regulated in terms of air quality, probably better than a hospital, most likely the most temperature controlled building inside and out. It's important for us to keep the facility, functioning in a way that won't be a nuisance to to our staff. And we also need to make sure that that same nuisance isn't, leaving outside. We did see an email earlier this week that kind of pointed to some issues that towns have had with cannabis cultivation in the past. This is a very infant industry. It's very new. Technology is being developed for this industry at a very rapid pace, very, very aggressively. I think that this industry has seen a lot of new and emerging technology as a result of the amount of money that is being invested in the space. So what was available 5, 6, 7 years ago has changed leagues over. This company that we're using, ProGuard, PCO is a traditional method of using charged ions to attach and bind themselves onto volatile organic compounds. And they actually took it a step further by using bipolar ionization to further reduce any pathogens or volatile organic compounds being in the air. So I think that we've created a buffer where we are passing the air through an active carbon system, and that system is being supported through 2 or 3 layers. In the air itself, the air that we breathe, these systems impact every surface. So it's not only creating sanitization for, the quality of the air that's in and outside the facility, it's also helping to keep the surfaces clean. So which means that pathogens, viruses, volatile organic compounds can't rest on surfaces. Nothing can survive inside that environment. That's what we're creating essentially. And it's also safe for humans and it's safe for marine life, as Drew had pointed out. If that helps.
And I would say, and to make it as practical as possible, because I like to talk like I'm talking to my children, you can't walk by the plant and ingest it, or you're not going to be impacted by the plant that's growing on its own. It has to be activated through a chemical process. So even if you were to walk through an entire field of trees, you wouldn't have passive exposure. It wouldn't enter your bloodstream. You wouldn't be impacted by it. It needs to be activated by a chemical process.
Okay. What about the safety of people who work in the facility? Will they be exposed to any of this?
No, and typically people are gowned up when they're in the plant room, and people think that folks are gowned up because of exposure, and it's really to protect the plants from our pathogens, from getting the plants sick. There is limited exposure. That's the reason we wanted to make sure we addressed air purification indoors first, to ensure that our employees were safe and felt safe, but also the carbon filtration to really mitigate the odor control as a kind of like a 1-2 punch kind of move. But the first initial odor mitigation was for indoor odor. So when you work in the facility, if you're not in the plant rooms, you should not be able to smell the plants.
Okay. I recognize that, you're employing some cutting-edge technology, and certainly there may be some proprietary information that you're not interested in sharing with the entire universe. But can you put this into context for us by sharing with us what, some other communities that are employing similar technology to control odor?
Well, I have not personally spoken with other communities that are using this state-of-the-art technology. A lot of them are the bigger facilities, a little further out, and they're less. And the reason people are using Western Massachusetts as a primary source is because they can use cheaper technologies to mitigate their odor. So we understand that we're in a more central location on the east side of the state, so we're investing a lot of money into odor mitigation and odor control indoor and outside of the facility. So I don't know that anyone is using, but we will be meeting with our vendors, and we can get a local list and do some of that legwork.
That would be very helpful to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have concerning odor. So if other people have other questions, they can.
If you'd like to continue, Council Flaherty, if you have other questions regarding the entire process, we can get them all out, and then I can transfer over to Council Ryan, unless you're deferring the floor for now.
The other question that I have is to. Flower Express has put forward a $6 million figure in estimated municipal revenue as if this facility is established here, and I'm trying to understand that number in context. Can you kind of share with us some other communities that have, the revenue that they've had, if they have been in business, long enough to have revenue, and, kind of the ratio of the size of your plant versus the size of what they're.
Absolutely, absolutely. I actually might have a slide that can help us with that. And actually it might be at the very beginning. So I'll pull it up for us so you can kind of talk through it. Essentially, cannabis is making over $100 million of revenue a month. This year alone, I updated these numbers today. These are the first week of July numbers. They've made $725.4 million, $3.2 billion in revenue total. So over $100 million of revenue a month. Municipalities are getting about 3%, and only about 40% of municipalities are participating. So if you look at last month, there were over $3.6 million in tax revenue collected throughout the state by municipalities based on the numbers that I actually updated these today. So July was $122.5 million. I'm not a mathematician off the top of my head, but I did some quick math, and I think it's about $3 million in tax revenue if you take 3% of that. And there are some municipalities that are also collecting impact fees that they're not reporting in that tax revenue. I actually live in a town that has one dispensary. It's one retail location. It's about 3,000 square feet of floor space, and it has a 5,000 square foot grow, a tier 1 grow. And based on local conversations, we've collected $5 million in revenue since they've been in town, and they've been in town a little over 16 months, not 2 years yet. And we are a very tiny town with not a lot of foot traffic or access to the highway, except Route 1, which is near Gillette Stadium. But other than that, we have seen municipalities grow a lot of money. And there's been over $170 million collected in tax revenue this year already, and that was a number that was reported in March. Or actually $50 million in revenue, and that was reported in March, and $170 million last year.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Anything further, Councilor Flaherty? Thank you. Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Chairman Rengus. Could you go back to the slide you did tonight, the presentation you did tonight?
Absolutely.
And keep going?
Yes, sir.
Right there, right there.
I figured you'd like that one.
When you're talking about the water, you're talking about capturing rainwater and using it to water the plants.
And then actually, yep, absolutely. There it goes, cultivation chief. I don't know what the question is yet,
Okay.
but he's next to me.
Well, you're saying portable water. I think you mean
Potable.
potable water,
Yeah.
from the Latin to drink.
Yes. Yes.
Portable is from the Latin to carry. I thought I'd get you
I was
with that
typing
one, Drew.
fast today, I apologize.
So, so you're just really looking, you're not going to have employees drinking this water, you're just going to be watering the plants with this, right?
No, the goal right now is to basically be as efficient with the water as possible. So we do understand that this facility will put some kind of tax and pressure on the water supply. It's a massive facility. The plants need to be fed. But what we're doing is we're putting measures in place to greatly reduce that. So water that will come, for the sinks and toilets, we will try to have a cistern where we will capture rainwater and, filter it. Not through reverse osmosis, because you do experience water loss going through reverse osmosis. You lose about 2/3 of the water. So we're not going to filter that water through reverse osmosis. That's going to be the water that ends up, back into the drain. So we're trying to further reduce our impact on the town water by having that. Also, each of the flower rooms will have a dehumidification system. This dehumidification system, what it does is it actually will extract water out of the air. It will reduce the humidity levels in the air, keep them balanced for us. That water will actually be collected and actually run back through the filtration system. So whatever we tax the system for, let's say if we have 25 or 30,000 gallons of water a day usage, we are going to have steady decreases per day. Just because of the systems that we have in place, by having the reservoir and by having the dehumidifiers in the building to recapture water that will reduce, our usage every day.
So you're going to capture water, rainwater, which I'm sure is going to be in some type of I would imagine you have a very large roof there, and you're going to
Yes.
have the roof drains going into some type of collection systems to store the water. Is that water going to be treated through the reverse osmosis system?
That won't go through RO, but it will go through, through a filtration system. So,
Okay.
it's going to be excellent water,
Okay.
as it comes through the system. We're going to make sure that we remove any heavy metals and things that could, be harmful to people. Make sure that it meets all the standards and guidelines. The RO water will be
But all you're going to
reserved-
do is water the plants with that water.
Not the rainwater. The rainwater, our plan is to filter it, and that will be for like the restrooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
then the water, and then you're going to have water from dehumidification in the facility.
that water from the dehumidifiers, we'll use that for the grounds. So we'll use that for landscaping. So that water will come in. We'll feed the grass with it. We'll do all of our grounds maintenance stuff with that. And then the water that we get from the town, that will be the water that we use to, actually go through the process of reverse osmosis to feed the plants. Only the plants that are in the flower room will use the reverse osmosis.
Okay, so I
water.
thought you indicated you were going to try to recycle some of the water you used in the facility.
That's correct. So now this system will be set up with a drip irrigation system. So as the plants get watered, when the water leaves the plants, it would actually go back through a drain and through a series of mesh filters to recapture any dirt, sediment that actually comes from the actual plants themselves, and then go through another filtration process. This is how we can have, per day, steadily anywhere from 10 to 15% savings on the water usage, because all the water that comes through the plants, none of it will end up being drained out.
Okay.
All the water that comes through the facility for the plant specifically will be filtered through again, utilized over until all of that water is gone. The only water that leaves the building is the water in the bathrooms, the water that's in the toilets, or the water that's at the sink. Any water we use for the plants will be used and used and used as much as we can.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and then with the odor control, and a question was asked about THC leaving the building. I really hope the answer is 100% no, there's going to be no THC leaving the building through the facility exhaust system for the
Right.
air, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, because you got into kind of a long-winded answer there, and I just mean
Yeah.
the answer is really no, absolutely. The
Yeah,
focus-
no. It can't leave the building,
Okay. Okay.
So, like we said earlier, the system is basically designed, all of these companies, they've done their due diligence, they've run their tests, and they've done their analysis. We went steps further. Each of these companies, especially like the activated carbon companies, they speak about how much cubic feet per minute their tanks can process or filter air. When we're doing the math and, each of the flower rooms, let's say it's about 70,000 cubic feet per minute, we get a tank that does about 80,000 cubic feet per minute. We know that tank itself is technically supposed to be able to facilitate that space. The one thing that I understand is that, these are numbers. So we need to make sure that we have the safeguards, especially because of where the facility is located in the metropolitan area. It makes sense that we go a little bit further. So what we've done is, in our design, we've made sure that we have the active carbon tank inside the room that's supposed to do its job, and that tank is being fed to another tank which serves as a buffer. So if that tank is supposed to capture all...
It's in series?
It's in series, exactly. And then what we did is, before it leaves the building, so there's one in the room, one outside the room that serves as a main hub, that all the rooms will basically feed to that series of activated carbon
all the
filters.
classified rooms where you have marijuana
That's correct.
exposed. You're not filtering the air out of the lunchroom, so it's all the
No, but-
classified areas, correct?
No, but we are integrating, air purification and filtration techniques to keep pathogens and viruses down, because we realize that we live in a new world now.
But
COVID
those
is
are
here.
individual stations mounted on the wall. They're not in line with the filtering system in the
Right,
exhaust,
right.
correct?
That's correct.
Because it almost sounded like the way you're presenting it, you were saying it was. That has nothing to do with the air filtration system.
No,
That's just a standalone
Yes.
ionization component
That's correct.
in an area.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I operated a reverse osmosis system. I used to be on a ship when I was in school at Mass Maritime. You can't get water out in the middle of the ocean. We had to pull seawater
Right.
out of the ocean and put it through a reverse osmosis to
System.
desalinate it. And with these carbon filtration systems, I'm in the wastewater business, and I have about 7 facilities that have carbon odor control units. I have some facilities that have carbon beds, which is a very large vessel with carbon, loose, granular, or tabular carbon, activated carbon, and the air passes through. Or you have filters, like canisters, that you can slide a canister in and pull it out. So what are we talking for this system? Are we talking canisters or carbon beds?
We're talking canisters. So
Okay.
they look like metal drums.
Yep.
And they're hooked up to different size fans. Some of them are like 100 horsepower. They have a certain, drive rate, for how much CFMs they could process. We're going for the more commercial end unit. The big part about this system is actually the end unit. Like the rooftop unit is actually a pretty sophisticated carbon filter. It's a little bit more complex than what I understand of carbon filters, but it is a combination of an activated carbon filter as well as a fan. I mean, as well as a, some kind of fan or driver to pull the air through.
Or you push the air through?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you're saying that you're pulling the air through at the end, you're saying, or you're pushing? Is it before the carbon
No,
unit or after the carbon? I would think it would be before the carbon unit.
That's at the end. Like this setup that I see, on the rooftop is, it seems as if the air is pushed through, the fan and then through the carbon filter. I do have my mechanical engineer guys here who are a little bit more technically savvy about this stuff. If you want to ask, a question.
No,
that maybe
I
they can
just wanted
answer.
to understand, you said that you have one carbon unit that can remove all the odors, and you have one in series afterwards that could polish the air, so to speak, and a redundancy, and that seems very good to me. With these units, you really need to have a good preventive maintenance program in place, because carbon does have a shelf life and does expire and get used up as it's been in service. So I really hope you're going to have a good monitoring program, because you have to monitor the air going through. And when we monitor it in wastewater, we monitor it for hydrogen sulfide, H2S. That's what the odor, it's a rotten eggs odor that we're removing to make sure. We want to be good neighbors and not have any odors.
Right.
You can very quickly become a bad neighbor if you're having odors. So you need to have this system, make sure it's properly maintained. One of the other questions I have, I kind of call them classified areas where you're going to have the marijuana growing. We can have the best odor control systems in the world, but if somebody leaves the door open and you have a grow room right there, and you can have odors escape in that way. So I'm wondering about the layout of the facility. Is all the growing on the inside of the facility? I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, so what we did was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the building.
I drive by it. I've never been in there.
So on the rear side, the side that faces the T, they have all the loading bays. And that's like generally where the biggest areas are for us to come into the building. What we've done in our architectural drawings and our mechanical plans is we've created a sterile area. So there's about a 75-foot buffer between the exterior wall of the building and to where the flower is actually being grown. So there is, like a common area, place for the employees and for staff and for administration. And then before you can go into the flower room, there's actually a sterile zone that all the workers are required to go gown up, put on their smocks, put on their hairnets, and then go through a negative pressure zone to make sure that they're not bringing any pathogens into the building. Mm-hmm. So it's very hard for the smell to come from that sterile area because of how stringent we're going to be with keeping that sterile zone inside the facility closed.
It's almost like when somebody does remediation in a facility, you have the area being remediated, then
Plastic and
you have
cordoned
a
off.
clean zone that's,
Yep.
but so you said negative pressure. So my concern also is that, you could have, you have on an HVAC system for a facility like this, I'm not an expert in this kind of stuff, but I would imagine that you have supply air coming into the facility, and you're going to have the exhaust air, and I think a lot of our concerns tonight are with the exhaust and possible odors. So is the facility, what type of pressure is the facility going to be kept under? Because I asked that question, that if you have more supply air coming into a facility than you're exhausting out of the facility's under pressure, and odors could be escaping out of the facility, versus having less supply air and more exhaust air and having the facility under a negative pressure, where if somebody did open a door, there's no the air is going to be moving into the facility. So does that come into the design for the HVAC system in the facility?
It definitely does. We are going at length. Our mechanical engineers who are taking care of all of our, odor stuff, water supplies, fire suppression, power. They have a very detailed questionnaire to make sure that we are addressing not only the things that plague cannabis, as an industry, but just, businesses, So those questions I would have to redirect towards Dennis. Yeah, so.
Okay.
The building will definitely be under negative pressure.
Can I ask a question? Who are you, sir? And what?
Dennis Brabeck, I'm senior mechanical engineer,
Okay, thank you.
professional engineer registered in the state of Massachusetts and several others. The building will, unlike a typical office building where you don't want infiltration, this building you actually do want the infiltration to control the odors. So yes, the building will be under negative pressure. We'll be taking out more air than we're putting in.
Okay, and so we have a very old building that hasn't been occupied in over 20-something years. Everything in there's probably fallen apart. I would hope that the proposed plan is to go in and completely remove all of the HVAC components that are on site now and 100% replace them with a new HVAC system. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. In fact, I've toured the building. There is no existing HVAC system left in that building. It's all gone,
Okay.
completely empty. The roof is being totally replaced. We're going to work with the architect to seal up the building. We need to insulate the building in order to get LEED credits. So yeah, the building is a shell, and it'll be brought up to current codes.
Okay, so you're going to have air handler units. Are they all going to be located on the roof?
Probably not. It'll
Okay.
probably be inside the building.
Okay. And you're going to
The
have...
roof currently is being dedicated to solar panels, so there's not a lot of room left up there.
Good. Good. Okay. So you're going to have air handling units supplying air into the facility. Then in these classified areas, you're going to have exhaust fans pulling the odorous air, for a lack of a better term, out of these classified areas, going through these carbon canister odor controls, being blown through them, being discharged out of the facility.
Basically, yes. There'll be self-contained filtration, carbon filters, hospital-grade filters in each of the flowering rooms to control the pathogens and the odors in those rooms, in addition to what we're doing elsewhere. So
Okay.
yeah, the flower rooms will basically have 3 levels of odor control.
So you said HEPA, high efficiency.
High-efficiency
particulate.
hospital-grade filters.
Okay, so I'd imagine those require changing filters quite often, being the
They
HEPA.
they have pre-filters in front of them to capture the larger particles. Typically, a MERV 8 filter goes in front of the MERV 16s, so that the MERV 16s will last 6 months to a year. The MERV 8's about every month or 2.
Okay, so there's going to be a preventive maintenance program. Are they going to recommend a computerized maintenance management system for maintenance of these mechanical components and equipment in the facility?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The plan was to have a control room, kind of like a dedicated nerve center for all of.
No, I'm just talking about maintenance on mechanical equipment, having a maintenance program to ensure that maintenance equipment is checked when it, as per manufacturer's recommended guidelines.
I was gonna say, that we're investing a lot of money into this piece of equipment, so the preventative maintenance schedules are important to us. I was in the healthcare tech world, and the FDA is a little stricter than most people, but we're going to be just as strict in keeping maintenance records. We're definitely going to have a compliance officer that oversees all of the checklist and ensure that these are tasks that are done on a regular basis. We do not want to lose any of our investment, and we don't want to ruin any of the investment. And the primary investment is actually the plants too, so we want to make sure we're protecting not only the community, but also protecting the plants because they're very sensitive. So the equipment has to work.
Okay. Okay. In the odor control system, as I mentioned, with the way we monitor it is we'll know the, we'll test the air going in before the carbon filtration system, and we test it for H2S in the wastewater business. And we'll use a very sophisticated meter like a Jerome meter that can measure down to parts per billion. And we'll test the air after it passes through the carbon filtration system, and we'll see that the H2S is 0.00, and we'll know it's working. Is there any type of methodology or testing that you can do to show that the filters are performing as designed?
Yes, there is. There is.
What
The
is that, sir?
technologies exist.
What is that? The test? What are you testing for to show that they're working?
Testing for the volatile organic compounds that are in the airstream.
Okay, so you can say that the VOCs that are being filtered through the carbon, that's the way to, that is directly related to the odors that would be leaving the facility. So if you have 0 VOCs passing through the carbon filtration system, you have 0 odors leaving the facility.
Correct.
Good, okay. Just trying to understand how you're going to be operating this system. So there is, you know, the VOCs measurement, and then there's the good old-fashioned smelling what's going on outside the facility and knowing that you don't have any odors out there as well. Okay. And when you're talking about the plant-based odor control, was that the ionization stuff?
No, that's actually another system.
Okay, so I would think that's something like a biofilter?
We don't have an image of the actual system, but it looks like small boxes that are chemicals. But I would get the information from EcoSorb that I'll share with Councilor
That's the
Flaherty.
independent stations in the rooms you were talking about?
Correct.
It's not part of the exhaust system, the HVAC system?
Correct.
All right, I wanted to understand that. Because we do use biofilters for odors as well in certain situations. I think that's all I have right now.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan. President Boricker is here tonight in an ex officio capacity in her role of president of the full council. Any questions, President Boricker?
Thank you very much, Chairman Ringus. I do have a few questions. First, going back to the water, for a facility this size, how many 1,000 gallons per day are you estimating that you're going to be using?
I sent the boys back too soon.
So we did some rough calculations on the amount of plants that will be inside the building. What we can't account for is for usage in the bathrooms, but we're estimating around 30 to 35,000 gallons of water a day in the facility.
Okay, and of that...
And that is I'm sorry to cut you off. That's when we're actually drawing from the system. Like I said, any water in the building will be recirculated through the facility again. So we expect at peak, at maximum 35,000. It should be significantly less as the building is actually operational.
So is there a way, or is there, I guess, maybe a subset of this question then, are there other facilities in the state that are this size that are cultivating marijuana today?
There are 4 Tier 11 cultivations in the state. 2 of them are outdoor and 2 of them are indoor. So technically this will be the 3rd. So
Third indoor one, okay.
yes, 3rd indoor facility.
So do you know what those facilities are using for gallons per day on average over the course of a year, if it's going to fluctuate?
It can be a very open, community in this business, and some things are just hard to, to kind of get that information. What we can do is kind of extrapolate that data based off of smaller data sets, and then scale it that way. So, yeah, we can try to ask. Hopefully, somebody will be friendly enough to give us that information.
Okay, so of the 35,000 gallons per day, what are you expecting for wastewater?
For wastewater,
I was going to say, did we get that far?
yeah, I don't want to just throw out a random number. It's not. That calculation hasn't been completely figured out because different RO systems have different water loss, so some systems lose 2/3, some say less, so I think that as we get a little bit further along in the process and we are truly picking the best system, based on supply chain, based off of real world usage, I think we'll get a little bit closer to a number. But right now, the team hasn't figured out that math yet. But that's something that we can definitely calculate and get back to you on.
Please. Thank you.
So when you say, what is the number, 35,000 gallons a day? So the majority of that water is going to be utilized for the plants, right?
Yeah.
So there's a smaller percentage of that water based on Title V guidelines that are going to be, the sinks, the toilets, other water. So a large percentage of this water is going to be used to grow the plants, and that's where you're saying you're trying to recover most of the water.
That's correct.
Okay. So on an industry standard, you mentioned 2/3, you lose 2/3 of the water?
Yeah, going through the RO process.
What's RO mean?
Say that again?
What does RO mean?
Reverse osmosis.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, reverse osmosis, yep.
Yeah, sorry.
You said that earlier, yep.
Yeah,
So when you recapture the water from the plants, you send it through the reverse osmosis, you could lose as much as 2/3 of that water.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
Okay.
what I was going to add is that we're very early on in this building project process. Our other facility is very different, and because of supply chain issues, we're still selecting our vendors. So forgive us if we're not have details nailed down. We would have the vendor experts here if we had nailed down our vendors. I think it's, as we're going through the process, we are focused more on the zoning piece and less on the vendors and the equipment piece of the part of the process. So a lot of these questions we don't have nailed down, and I don't want to just give you answers to give you an answer. I think it's once we have these vendors nailed down, and as we're going through the special permit process, there'll be another opportunity to really answer these in much more detail if we ever get that far. But at the moment, we are still evaluating vendors, and the supply chain is very funky right now. So it's things are changing daily. They were changing this morning. So I don't want to just give you guys answers that we don't necessarily have at the time.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I just want to confirm, again, you'd said on the roof of this facility, it's slated, and I know you have the renderings there, for solar panels. Would there be other equipment on the roof? And the reason I'm asking is because the neighborhood that abuts this facility, if they're in their second story, they're going to be able to look down on the roof of this building. They do today. So is it just for solar panels at this
Correct.
point? Okay.
Can I build on that through the chair? So sometimes when you have a facility that you have in a sensitive area, and you might have stuff less than stuff you don't want to look at, you might have some type of wall up or some type of ornate fencing or something that could block the view from the neighborhood. Was that something you'd consider having, especially since the back of this building butts up against a residential area, that if they were looking at, something that should be hidden from view?
Well, I have not evaluated that. We haven't had a surveyor come in and evaluate that as of yet. I personally have walked the streets, and I can't see the facility over the MBTA wall from the street that we walked on. So I'm not sure if people that are higher up can actually see it. So we haven't even addressed that as a concern. We didn't realize that that was even a question. We thought the solar panels on a roof would be pretty normal for an industrial building.
Thank you.
President Borica.
Thank you very much. All right, just changing course a little bit. Councilor Flaherty touched on this a little bit earlier, but how long does it take for a facility like this to get up and running in terms of revenue realization?
That's, as I say, cultivation question. You can answer the cultivation question. I think just getting the building rehabbed is going to be quite a challenge with the supply chain the way it is now, but I'll let you answer that in terms of cultivation.
Yeah, so real estate development wise, I think it's going to take 18 months to build out this facility, to retrofit it. And that is if everything is operating smoothly, like Drew said. If the supply chain gets better and we can get certain things that don't have 50 or 80 week lead times, then I think we can do it in 18 months. I think a realistic timeline could be 2 years, and it could be 2.5 years before these revenues or gains are realized. Because once the facility is up and running, it's going to take 4 to 6 months to grow the first crop, and then to go through the processing, trimming, curing, and then delivering to retail. So we think that 24 months to 30 months is a realistic time frame for this project.
Okay, thank you. And then for one of the topics that you discussed last time was the job opportunities for, with preference to Braintree residents, the 200 potential jobs. Are those, and forgive me if you already stated this or remind me, are those full-time year-round, or is that like in other agricultural situations where it's just at harvest time that those jobs would be needed?
So our business plan is to have staggered harvesting times so that we're always growing and taking down flowers. So we will have full-time positions majority of the time. We're trying to build a career type of establishment. We don't want people to just come in and be workers. We want people to come in and have career advancement opportunities, leadership opportunities, opportunities to grow within our business. And we're going to have majority full-time jobs. If we ever get in a pinch, we will definitely open up part-time jobs and positions in that way. He's funny. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I think that is it, Chairman Ringus, for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Burke. Any, Councilor Ryan for...
I have a follow-up mechanical question. I don't know if the gentleman...
You want to see Dennis again?
The professional engineer.
Dennis, would you mind coming up? Thank you.
So we talked about the HVAC system, and in what I'm calling the classified areas where there's marijuana located, that we have to filter that air. And you talk about the cubic area that it's going to be removing air. Is there a set like air exchange rate for something of this type of process? I know in my industry we say we want to do 12 air exchanges per hour. Is there a set rate in a facility like this? And I'm wondering how the system's going to be designed to ensure that air exchange rate can be met, and to ensure there might be some type of redundancy built into the system in case something goes down. You have, when you need 2 things, you have 3 in case one goes down.
The current thinking of our design team is to do many individual systems for each of the little rooms. There's several flower rooms. Like they said, they're going to progressive harvest, so there'll always be harvesting going on during the process with curing. Each room will have its own system, its own electrical panel, so there's redundancy built into the system, so we won't lose the whole facility at one time. If you lose anything, you lose one room. And again, all the air in the facility is extracted through a common system, so even if you lose one room and there's something happen in there. It's not going to overload that total exhaust system.
It's all going through one exhaust system, so you're not going to lose one room and you could have bad air coming out of the room. Everything's going through one exhaust system. Okay.
At the end,
Okay.
each room has its own filtration system independent of the total exhaust system.
Okay. And is this facility going to have backup emergency generator to power the
Definitely.
facility?
Yes.
Okay. And where is that going to be located in relation? Is it going to be on the, I'm just wondering about noise. Is it going to have sound attenuation on the generator?
We could bring our electrical.
Can you just introduce yourself when you get to the mic?
Yes, there will be backup generator on the left side of the building. Louis Crispin, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would imagine that one of the biggest energy uses in this facility is going to be the fans, the supply fans and the exhaust fans. So if you lose utility power, you have an ATS to sense the loss of power, and you're going to have those key components are going to be on the backup generator. So if you lose utility power, the exhaust system's still going to work. We're still going to have no odors going out of the facility, correct?
Yes, sir. So the way we're building the system, it's a N+1. So which means if you lose the normal power, you still have emergency power to power the facility up.
Okay. Thank you. And one more question. So how many times are you turning over the air in a room? I don't know if I didn't hear the answer to that part of the question I asked. Is there a goal, turn the air exchanges per hour in the room?
There is a goal. It's 2 air changes an hour. But there's fans inside the room that are circulating the air in the room itself. That's not part of the HVAC system. It's part of the filtration and air movement system. Because these plants need to be in a very homogeneous condition for temperature and humidity. We can't have stratification. We can't have wet spots or dry spots. They need to be fairly homogeneous in the air.
How many of these types of facilities have you been involved with the design of?
Our team has been involved with, what, 4? 4. 2 of them currently under construction.
Is there any permits associated with the air being exhausted from this facility? Any permits from any regulatory agencies?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I'm not aware of them either. So, thank you.
But, the filtration that we're doing will meet all the any EPA requirements that we might encounter.
Are there regulations from the EPA or the DEP for the construction of these facilities, or any types of regulation at all?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No, sir.
Well, I like the fact that you're going with the LEED, certification. It's excellent. The solar powered and recapturing rainwater, and
We're doing all we can to minimize the impact.
thank you. All set.
Anything further from any of the councilors? I only have one question for you because there was, I think, a thorough amount of questions there. In your initial sort of plan that was proposed, there was discussion of your philanthropic sort of endeavors and how you might commit yourselves to the town in that way. What is the plan in regards to that if eventually approved?
Well, there's a lot of plans. We wanted to ensure we first built a committee of community leaders that would manage a fund. It would be a percentage of our profits so that the town could decide how this money would be used in addition to the tax revenue. So that's something that we're working on. Our chief diversity equity officer and community outreach person is out sick today, so she could have given you a lot more detail, but I can kind of find that slide for you and talk a little bit about some of what we're planning for. And what our chief of cultivation was talking about is Flower Express University, really putting our employees through an internal training program so that whether you start essentially at the very beginning, we can move you up and you can become a leader in the company and expand and maybe work at this location or other locations. So essentially we wanted to make sure, and I don't know if I have this on a slide per se, but one of the things we did want to do is essentially create a fund that was run by the town. And that would be one of the philanthropic impacts that we wanted to do. We want to let the town lead in that sense, have more community conversations, talk about the needs of the town, what are the greatest needs. Some folks are more leaning towards maybe we need more playgrounds, we need more trees, we need more school updates, more programming. I think that the Braintree residents should have the primary say, and the leaders that are already established in the community and understand what's happening in the community and what is being cut out through the years because of budgeting, and we can help pour back into those resources that have been kind of depleted over the years. So essentially building a group of Braintree residents that will manage a fund that we will set up and have just somebody on our company sit on that seat to help essentially guide and understand the conversation so that we can allocate the right amount of funding every year for the fund. And that's just one of the things we wanted to do. We also want to, put together community outreach programs. We want to do job fairs. We want to do what we're doing in all the other communities that we have businesses in, and it's basically just make it a better place. By nature of being there, we plan on using all local resources. So when our linens and our lab coats need to get changed, we're going to be using local launderers. Like when we need landscaping, we're going to be using Braintree landscapers. We're going to be using union workers to make sure that we're keeping all the dollars circulating in the town.
Okay, thank you very much for that. One last time, anything further from the councilors? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation.
Thank
and
you
the
for your
answers to the
time. Thank you
questions.
for your presence again, and for all the townspeople that were out here tonight. Thank you.
Before we move on, President Bulwark, I appreciate you being here tonight. You did have some conversations with the Cannabis Control Commission. Did you want to update the councilors here tonight on some of those conversations and some of the contact information that you were able to glean?
I would be happy to. Give me 1 second, and I actually have my laptop with me so I can bring up the information and make sure I'm giving it accurately. So give me 1 second.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Ringus. I was able to connect with Matt Giancola, who is the Director of Government Affairs and Policy at the Cannabis Control Commission. For residents who might be listening or here tonight, you can reach Mr. Giancola directly. I give his phone number. It's 774-415-0462. He did give me permission to give that out. You can also email the commission at commission@cccmass.com. My recommendation is if you send an email to the commission, copy your district counselor so that we can help advocate on your behalf and we know what's on your mind. But I did reach out to him and got some information. Some information is still outstanding, and some information I have back. So one thing I know I've been interested in, and I think some of my colleagues have as well, is understanding the buffer zone between cultivation facilities and residences. The CCC does not have a standard buffer zone for residences. It only has a buffer zone established for K-12 schools, and that is 500 feet, doorway to doorway. The second thing I reached out to them about was, again, the odor concerns, and thank you to my colleagues on the Ordinance and Rules Committee for their diligence on this issue. One piece of information that I think is important for all of us to know, and I learned from the Director of Government Affairs, is that each cannabis facility in the state has an investigator assigned to it from the CCC, and I did ask that they have the proper resources at the state level, and he assured me they do. So every facility that is built in the state has its own investigator. The investigators will take any concerns from residents, from elected officials, business owners, whatever it may be. They will come out to the facility, they will investigate, they will create a plan of corrective action if one needs to be made, and they can also, the CCC can also issue fines, suspensions, up to a revocation of a license if they deem it necessary because of whatever violation may or may not have occurred. And I also want to point out to residents that the CCC has a lot of information on their website. You can go to mass.gov or you can go to Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts. There's a ton of resources there, and it is it's a pretty intuitive and user-friendly website as well. So again, reach out to your district counselors or the counselors at large if you have questions that we can help get answered for you.
Thank you, Councilor
Thank
Boerker.
you, Councilor Ringus.
Any further comments or questions tonight from any of the councilors? Seeing none, I'll just kind of state a couple of things. Obviously, there is a lot for us to consider right now. We've got answers from Flower Express tonight on many of those questions. We continue to hear from residents who are both favorable to this change and who are against this change. As Clerk Casey mentioned tonight, it seems like the ballot question from a citizens initiative would be impossible to make by that August 3rd date. And it appears from what the charter says that we couldn't get it on the ballot as a council until sometime further in the future. So we do have some important decisions to make. I think one thing to sort of keep in mind, and that weighs on me definitely, is we are not approving, and I think it's an important thing to remember, we would not be approving Flower Express. If we pass these proposed changes, we're changing the zoning in the entire town of Braintree for commercial and highway business. So this would open up the opportunity for other businesses to come before the planning board and to try to bring their facilities to Braintree as well. So any sort of vote that we take isn't just for Flower Express. That's what the planning board will do through their site plan review if we were to adopt these changes. We're affecting the town zoning law as a whole. And Flower Express has been phenomenal with the answers that they've brought to our questions, to continuing to appear before us. But it's definitely something that I consider in going forward, is that this is not for one business. This is for the entirety of our town. So it's definitely something that I think we have to put a lot of consideration into as we move forward. At this point, I know there are still some outstanding materials we're waiting for on answers. The counselors up here, I appreciate my fellow counselors for the diligence that they put in here. Obviously, Councilor Flaherty has been out speaking to many community members and getting some of the questions that she proposed to the Flower Express tonight. Councilor Ryan brings a breadth of experience in terms of some of the filtration issues and some of the other issues, obviously, that we saw tonight. So his subject matter expertise is very helpful for this board as we sort of make our considerations. We are still awaiting some sort of decisions or hearing back from the Attorney General's office, from our town solicitor, as well as from our planning department. We're waiting on some information that was provided to the planning board at their meeting, but I would like it to be brought into the record as part of our ordinance and rules as well. So with that said, what I would ask is that we table this to our next O&R meeting with a date to be determined, and hopefully at that meeting we can get the answers that we need and make the next forward steps one way or the other.
Motion to table to the next O&R meeting to be determined.
I have a motion to table 22015 to a next O&R meeting with a date to be determined. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Flaherty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is unanimous. That date will be posted. We'll have an exact date very soon, within the next couple of days. And that will be posted so the folks will be aware and be able to attend and listen. With that said, do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? I have a motion from Councilor Ryan. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilor Flaherty. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight.